In our next section, we're going to look at combination factoring. So in this one, we are going to use greatest common factor and MAM factoring. We are going to do both of those. So first, we're going to start with our greatest common factor, and then we are going to use our MAM. So if we look at number 1, if we look at our coefficients, we have 2, 14, and 12. I know that I can take 2 out of all 3 of those numbers, because if I make a factor tree from all 3 of them, 2, I get 2 times 1. 14, I get 2 times 7. And 12, I get 2 times 6. If I take a 2 out of each one of those, pull that out front, and then what I'm left with inside is I have 1, and now I have all my variables here. X squared, I have 7x, and I have 6. So I just pulled my greatest common factor out of that trinomial. The next thing I'm going to do is use MAM to factor my trinomial. So if I label it, I have this as M-A-M. Make my box. I have 1 times 6 is 6, and I need to add to 7. Well, I know 1 times 6 and 1 plus 6, that gives me 7. So those are my 2 numbers. I can take my coefficient and split my variable. So I have 1x over 1 and over 6. Take my 2 numbers here and put those on the denominator. I can't simplify those at all, so I'm ready to write my final answer. I have a 2 out front here, and then inside my parentheses I have my 2 binomials. I have 1x plus 1, and then my second set is 1x plus 6. And that is how you use greatest common factor and MAM factoring to get my answer. Okay, so let's look at number 2. We split this up, 2x squared y cubed, and we have 5x y squared and 3y. Into all of our factor tree numbers, we get 2 times x times y times y times y. Then we get 5 times x times y, and 3 times y. I see in all 3 of those I have a y, so I can pull y outside of my trinomial. When I do that, I'm left with 2x squared y squared plus 5xy minus 3. Okay, so then I'm going to use MAM. I have multiply, add, multiply. Create my box. I have 2 times negative 3 gives me negative 6. And then I know they need to add to 5. So if I start multiplying numbers, if I have a negative 1 times 6, that gives me negative 6. And if I add those two, negative 1 plus 6, that gives me positive 5. So right away I found my answer, negative 1 and 6. Now I'm going to take my first term and I'm going to drop my coefficient and split my variables. So I have x in each one of those and I have a y in each one of those. And I'll put my 2 numbers here on the denominator. So I have a negative 1 and a 6. Now I'm ready to write my polynomial. So I have my original y out front, and my first binomial is going to be 2xy minus 1, and my second binomial is going to be 2xy plus 6. And I have my answer. This time I only have 2 terms, and I'm going to again start by pulling out my greatest common factor. So if I have 5ax squared, that splits up into 5 times a times x, and then I have a 45a, and I can split that into 5 times 9a. Now I could split it up further, but I already see right away my 5 and my 5, and my a and my a can be pulled out of both of those. So if I do that, I have 5a pulled out front. That leaves me with x times x, which is x squared, minus 9. Now, to factor this middle part, I have my formula for factoring by squares. So if I take the square root of both of these pieces, square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 9 is 3. I can create my binomial by using my formula. I have x minus 3 and x plus 3. So if you don't remember that formula, look back at the last section and see how I got that formula. And then I'm going to bring down this part outside. So this is my final answer. Okay, my next example. If I look at my numbers here, try and find my greatest common factor, I have 9x squared, which splits into 3 times x, and I have y to the 4th, which is just y 4 times. I have no greatest common factors here, so I can't pull anything out. So I'm stuck with this equation right here. Now if I want to find the difference of squares, I can take the square root of both sides and see if it is possible. So if I take the square root of 9x squared, that gives me 3x. Then if I take the square root of 4 to the y, remember I'm taking that 4 and dividing by 2, I get 4 squared. Sorry, not 4, y squared. So these are my squares I'm going to put into that formula. I get 3x minus y squared and 3x plus y squared. And that is my answer for number 4. Okay, we have one more. Number 5. Let's see if we can do anything with this one. So if we look at it right away, there is nothing we can pull out of there for the greatest common factor. If you don't see that, write out the factor trees, and you'll see there's nothing that overlaps with all 3 of these terms. Now, our next step is to make our table. We have our MAM. Multiply, add, multiply. 5 times 1 is 5. We need to add to 7. So if we try to find that, we have 1 times 5. Oops. 1 times 5, that gives us 6. Let's see, 2 times, nope, we can't do anything times that. This is our only way we can multiply 2 numbers to get 5. So this is prime, and we cannot factor it.